All right, welcome back to Grok Talk, brought to you by GraniteGrok.com and the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers. Don't forget to check us out on Spreaker, Stitcher, iTunes, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, and, of course, YouTube, Ustream, and at GraniteGrok.com. We would like to tell you our next guest is a regular contributor to townhall.com, Christian Post, Right Wing News, and many others. She frequently appears on TV and news radio as a conservative commentator. She's a recovering attorney and former Gun magazine editor. Previously served as a former assistant attorney general for the state of Arizona, corporate attorney for GoDaddy Software, and special assistant deputy county attorney for the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. I would like to welcome to the program Rachel Alexander. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Sure, great. Thanks. So it's been an interesting week. I think Skip spent, 3 days doing his taxes?
Yep.
3 days. I took a weekend off from the program to stay home and do my taxes for 2 days. And lo and behold, we have you coming on to talk to us about taxes. And you recently posted a great article, which now I can't find for some reason. Here we go. Click the right thing. Called Tax Day Surprise, Big Brother is Getting Bigger and Bigger. And, of course, we have Bernie running for president, right? So it could get even bigger still.
Yeah, it's getting worse. I mean, we think our taxes go up every year, but this year it's particularly bad because you also have the Obamacare penalty, and that keeps increasing every year. I mean, a family of four, could end up being penalized $1,000 for not having health insurance. And then you're right, Bernie Sanders, he's running on this insane platform where, like, a middle-class family is going to end up paying $4,700 more dollars a year in taxes. That's because he wants to give everyone free socialist single-payer health care and free college tuition, but it's not free.
No, and that's the thing that amazes me. This is Skip, and thanks for coming on the show. Tonstoffel. There ain't no such thing as a free lunch, and yet I'm going to be 60 in October, and I look at growing up during the Cold War, and we look at the failed economies of our former Cold War enemies and the socialism and communism that went through it, and I'm looking at our current crop of 20-somethings that are going all gaga, as well as the old bandanaed retro 60s folks going, yeah, give me that stuff, socialism, yeah. And I'm going, what the heck have we lost here? Why are they so quick to adopt the socialism? And I don't get it. So, Rachel, what's going on with people in taxes, especially those on the left again?
Well, what I think is it's a two-part problem. First of all, these younger people have been indoctrinated by the increasingly left-leaning schools. They don't learn, real capitalism, economics, free markets. They're learning all this other stuff, this other garbage, and so they don't have a real grasp of finances. And secondly, I think the other problem is they can't even afford to move out of their parents' house, so they're all still living with their parents, and they're not feeling what it's like to have to pay rent and come up with all your own expenses. And they've done studies. As these generations age, they become more conservative by the time they finally move out and have to pay bills. It happened to I'm one of the Generation X, and our generation used to be very liberal when we were in our 20s, but now that we're growing up and paying our own bills, we're more conservative.
Now, I have one of those helicopter kids, and fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on your point of view, it's a result of coming out of the 101st, so we're giving him a place to stay until he's all set and ready to go again. But in his case, he's got a dad who's done politics for years, and I'm kind of surprised and all of a sudden how adamant and how militaristic he's getting about conservatism. But he's always online trolling some of his former friends who have all gone for Bernie, and he can't understand what the heck is going on. So what would you say to somebody who's a Bernie supporter as far as taxes are concerned?
Well, first of all, I would tell them, how much their taxes are going to go up under Sanders. I would tell them, okay, Sanders says taxes are not going to go up on the middle class, but he clearly lies. And I would just give him a list of all the different ways Sanders is going to raise taxes. If you look, he's raising them every single area you can think, from capital gains, the corporate taxes, to taxes on higher income brackets. He's even raising taxes on very, very poor people.
Right, but these kids think they're going to be tax recipients, not taxpayers. They haven't figured out that the math doesn't add up.
That's right. And, well, you're living with your parents and you don't have any bills. The free college tuition sounds wonderful. But what are you going to do when you're out of college and you no longer have parents to live with? It's going to be a real nasty surprise.
Now, I know that Obamacare actually has a built-in safety net for this. If you're at home going to college up to the age of 26, you don't have to worry about insurance. Given that the current economic climate is putting a lot of pressure on job creation, and a Bernie Sanders type economic climate would totally ruin job creation, it becomes almost impossible to get a job, to get insurance after you're 26. Is that something that they might understand?
Our words exactly.
Yeah, I don't think they'll grasp it until they really are out trying to find a job, because the one thing I look at this generation, they're so entitled. They think they can go to school and not even work. And so they're not even looking for jobs yet. A lot of them, they're just, mommy and daddy will pay for everything. And until they actually start looking for jobs, like I have 4 teenage daughters, and the oldest 3 are old enough to work, and they all work. But what's frustrating is they can't even get they can't even get good hours, because no employer will give them more than 30 hours a week, because then they have the Obamacare health insurance requirement.
I'm so glad to hear that your kids are working. I have 3 teenage kids myself, and they all work. I'm a big believer in that. But I'm also happy to hear you talk about the lack of education for our youth in this country right now. I mean, it hasn't been that long that we saw the Berlin Wall fall. We saw socialism fail almost pervasively around the world. Why are our kids looking at this as the golden gun, the solution here that can solve all our problems, when we know historically that it doesn't work?
Because they didn't live through any of that stuff. You bring up a really good point. They never saw the Berlin Wall come down, and instead they've got, our generation, which has done pretty well for ourselves. I mean, I know my generation tends to be pretty hardworking, and so my husband and I have done everything we can to give our kids a pretty decent lifestyle. So, our oldest daughter was dating a guy who, his mom's a dentist, and so he drives a Mercedes. So, these younger kids have had it easy their whole lives, and when you've been coddled like that, you're more likely to just have these unrealistic, everything should be free views.
We've had a number of people on who have come out of Eastern European countries, and they lived under communism. They lived under real socialism. And the stories they tell were horrific. And there's a group of folks even now that have come out of Soviet Union, for instance. They're absolutely horrified to see that, just to see that an open socialist who was a friend of Nicaragua and Guatemala, some of the former socialist South American countries, and they're going, what the heck are you doing to yourselves? And, as far as living through it, I keep telling my son as he trolls these socialist friends of his, tell him to look at Venezuela. If you want to see real socialism where you can't even buy toilet paper, there you go. I'm at my wit's end to try in trying to figure this out.
Well, I feel like we're going down this slippery slope, or you're heating the frog up in the boiling water so slowly. These kids have grown up with Obama as their president, and so he's already most of the way over there to Bernie's socialism, and so these kids have grown up thinking, there's this charismatic, wonderful black man. He's pretty far left. He puts in Obamacare, and so that's all they've ever known, and they think that's wonderful. We have the first black man. Never mind the fact he's practically a socialist. And so I think they've already been, primed at the pump to think we need to kind of go over to the left like this. And Bernie Sanders just represents even more, a little bit more of that.
Yeah, I grew up thinking it was perfectly normal for the government to own the railways, the post office, the telephone companies, the electricity companies, the coal companies, the sugar companies, steel companies, 2 auto companies, and all the rest of it. And I gradually realized that it wasn't working. And every year, usually more than once, one or more of these industries would go on strike. He'd run out of coal in the middle of winter. The electricity would stop. The trains wouldn't run, and so on and so forth. And, there were brief bursts of mild rhino-ish conservatism, which usually just resulted in even nastier confrontations with the unions, until this strong woman came along and said, "This is all bullshit. Basically, it isn't going to work. We need to get the government out of these things and let people work." And lo and behold, the economy blossomed. But we had lived under variously aggressive forms of socialism for probably 30 years at that point.
And of course, you're talking about England, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing about that is you live through it, so you learn from it. And again, these young kids have just been coddled their whole lives, and they've never faced hardship or adversity.
All right, let's talk about how we fix it if we can. I mean, we have this incredibly complex tax system. It's not going to go quietly into that good night. What is, in your mind anyway, a conservative solution to our huge IRS tax problem?
I lean towards the flat tax, and the only candidate supporting that is Ted Cruz. That pretty much can get rid of all the IRS forms, all the thousands of deductions, everything. Just tax everybody at a 9% or whatever works, but that would be the fairest way and the easiest way, and it would lower taxes for everyone.
So what would you propose that we do with the 13,000 plus pages of tax code now, then?
Start a fire?
Well, wasn't Carly Fiorina the one who said she wanted to cut it down to 3 pages?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep. And do your returns on a postcard.
Yeah, she's a very effective spokeswoman for reducing government. That's why I think having her, at least on stage with Ted Cruz, if not necessarily on ticket, is making a huge difference.
Rachel, I have a question.
Yeah.
I have a question for you. What do you think the over/under is if somebody like Ted Cruz, and we have endorsed him, just to let you know, as Granite Rock, what do you think the likelihood is of Ted Cruz being able to ram through such reforms to bring it down to some semblance of normalcy where the tax code is no longer used as behavioral modification, and just as the founders thought, and we were talking about this in our pre-show, just to raise sufficient monies to fund the government?
I think he has a pretty realistic chance as long as Republicans can keep hold of the Senate and the House. Obviously, if he becomes president in his first couple of years, we should retain control of them. So he'll need to put it through in the first couple of years. And if he makes it a big priority, like how Obama made Obamacare a big priority, it's even more likely to happen. If he says, "I'm going to be the one to champion the flat tax," and he'll be able to get momentum.
Okay, I got a different question, and this stems from Andrew Breitbart's famous quote, at least for me: "Politics is downstream of culture." And my question is, how much of a role do you think parents and the pop culture deal with this whole burgeoning idea of socialism and referencing back to taxes? Do you think parents have been so willing to outsource their education to the educational industrial complex that they've forgotten the primary responsibility of parents is to educate their kids? And has it been that a lot of conservative parents or even middle-of-the-road parents have just dropped the ball on the ideals that made this country great?
Absolutely. I mean, I look at, our 4 teenage girls versus, all their friends at school, and they've got all these, liberal friends because their parents are not strong conservatives. Their parents don't talk to them about conservative politics. Their parents just let the schools indoctrinate them. I mean, one of my youngest got rebuked by a teacher because the teacher was trying to say that there's nothing wrong with abortion, and my youngest argued back with the teacher. But you see, you've got all these liberal teachers that are teaching these kids these things that are always lean to the left, and so if you don't have the parents, fighting back, these kids are going to get indoctrinated.
This is happening at the Bernie wants to have free community colleges too, because I have two kids who have a series of classes in their pursuit of a liberal arts degree, and so they have like art classes and photography classes and stuff like that. And they get in the car and they're like, all that guy does is talk about socialism stuff. He knows what it is. He understands that it's this bias that they have towards socialism and progressivism, and he just talks about how great Obama is, or how great Hillary is, or how great Bernie is, or whatever, and he just has to sit there and it's like, say, it's photography or something. It's not like they're engaging in this; they're working on a project, like working in Photoshop, and he's just bantering on about it in the background, and he's like, "It's driving me crazy."
Yeah, it's just it's really unfair how left wing they've become, and they'll grade against you. I mean, I've had to warn my kids, be careful what you say in class, or your left-wing teacher could give you a poor grade. It happened to me when I was in high school and college. And you guys brought up pop culture and TV. That's the other thing. A lot of parents, they don't monitor what their kids watch. Now, the one good thing is this youngest generation is really changing. They don't watch TV anymore. They're just always on their phones. So at least, they're not probably seeing as much of these raunchy shows. I mean, TV's got so disgusting. I wouldn't watch any of the popular shows today.
All right, we are coming towards the end of our segment. I want to thank you for coming on the show with us this morning, and hope you have a great week. And how do people reach you?
Oh, my primary job is with the Stream. It's stream.org, and you can find all my main columns on stream.org. And you can email me there, too.
Okay, great. Well, thanks so much for spending some time with us today.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Have a great weekend. Bye-bye. All right, we will take a little break, and then we'll come right back and talk about something else.
Rock Talk.